excited. Thank you all so much for coming to this webinar held by Lamont Admission on the topic of networking in music, a very, very important topic that we are all in agreement should be covered. And it's the earlier you start with this, the better. So I would like to first just give a few tips on behalf of Lamont Admission, and then I'm going to introduce our wonderful faculty panel. So I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, let's make this big. And then we'll wrap up with some Q&A at the end. Okay, so from an admissions perspective, networking is so important, especially for music students, for a couple of big reasons. The biggest one is that you're going to be having these weekly one-on-one lessons with your applied faculty member, and it's arguably the most important relationship that you'll have while you're in college from a student-teacher perspective. You're also going to be having multiple rehearsals every week with your ensemble directors. And so we think that it's important that you establish those networking skills now, because you will put them to work once you're a student in college. You will build on those skills and they will benefit you for the very rest of your career. So here's some advice that we in Lamont Admission will commonly give to students. First, research those faculty members at the school that you're considering. Read up on their biographies, their backgrounds, find some recordings or videos of them playing if you can, or singing, and then jot down any notes. And this is the real research part of your job here. And jot down potential questions that you have. And then when it comes to reaching out to those faculty members, here's a really good way to write an email. So first of all, introduce yourself, say what you play, what year in school you are, where you live, where you go to school, and then go into something specific that you read about that faculty member that caught your eye. And then tell them, hey, I'm really interested in your school and with studying with you. And then you go into the ask portion of the email, where you ask for a meeting or even a Zoom lesson with them. You'll find that a lot of faculty members are now doing the Zoom lessons because we're, 9 months into a pandemic, and we're all pretty agile with Zoom at this point. And then it's always nice to offer to compensate them for their time. They may or may not ask for a fee, but it's the courteous thing to do because they're using some of their time to meet with you. And then this is really important, and a lot of people miss this, but after you get done with that meeting, send a thank you note. A written thank you note is always preferred, and not very many people do it, so that'll really help you stand out from the crowd. At least send an email saying, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciated learning this and this and this, and I'd love to keep in touch. So it's pretty straightforward, but you'd be surprised how few people actually know, understand this process. So those are just some tips from Lamont Admission. And now we're going to go into, we're going to meet our wonderful faculty panel. So we have on hand Tom Miller. He is one of our percussion faculty members. He's also the director of the steel drum ensemble at Lamont. Matthewzulkind, assistant professor of cello. Stephanie Cheng, teaching assistant professor of piano, Jeremy Reynolds, associate professor of clarinet, and Richard Harris, assistant professor of trombone. So we're going to hear from each of our faculty members, and they're going to give give their sort of philosophy about networking, and then some specific tips or examples of things that they have done to network. And I would encourage our attendees to put any questions or comments you have in the chat or the Q&A function, and then we'll address those questions at the very end. So first, let's hear from Tom Miller. Tom, you are muted.
Thank you, Angela. Really nice introduction, presentation. Thanks for putting that together. And thank you for the other faculty members, colleagues here, and the attendees. And I think as Angela sort of got the ball rolling on this, networking in the arts, in any business, but especially in the arts, it is probably one of the most important things we have to do. As I say here on the, your talent is your asset, is your best asset in terms of what you offer the music industry as a business. But eventually, ultimately, your net worth is your network. We all know many, many talented musicians who they don't have much of a network, and so they aren't really working as much as those who do have networks. So think of your network as your net worth in your business of music. Now, you might feel like you're just starting college, you don't have to worry about music business. But like Angela had mentioned, it starts now. It starts in college, getting used to networking, which is going to be something you're going to do the rest of your life. So some of the things that I have here are going to kind of overlap on what Angela said. The most important thing I think is always introduce yourself. You'd be surprised how many people walk into a situation and they just simply don't introduce themselves. Hi, I'm so and so. This is what I do. I play this instrument, or I come from here, I come from there. People really, and not just in a musical situation, any place in life, you'd be surprised how introducing yourself. There was a time I introduced myself to a checkout person at the grocery store whose father happened to be a musician that worked in a field of recording engineering. And I had heard his name and I had wanted to work with him. And it was funny, it was his daughter that was the checkout person. And just by me introducing myself and saying hi while my groceries are getting checked out, I made a contact with somebody that I ended up working with many times over my life. So the introduction is something that can happen in any situation. Another thing, show up and be present. This is a great place to learn in college because you're going to have to show up to rehearsals and show up to your lessons. Show up and be very present when you show up. So what that means by being present isn't just sitting there and, hey, I'm here. It means being prepared in the situation. Again, your network starts with you. You think of it as you're the center of your network. So what you bring to the network is what you're going to build off of. So showing up to ensemble rehearsals prepared on time, showing up to your lesson prepared on time, doing what's asked of you, that's being present. And that goes a long way. In the music industry, those of us who hire other musicians, we should be the musician we want to hire. You're not going to hire somebody who doesn't show up prepared on time. So get used to being the musician that you want to hire. So third I have is listen. I'll listen to what everybody tells you. And this is a great place in college. People have great information, and part of networking is listening. Now, when you get out of college, listening comes in a different situation. When you network people, we're all looking for gigs, we're looking for work. Listen to what the person is needing for their job. Too many of us go into a situation thinking, what can I get from this person? Go into the situation thinking, what can I offer this person? It's a much healthier place to be. And the person on the other end will appreciate not being heavily networked, but realizing that you want to bring something to the table and not a situation. So by listening, you develop that idea of, I've heard, so this is what I know I can offer. And then finally, just one of the things I wanted to get is at some point there's going to be cold calling in your life where you haven't met this person, but you want to develop a working relationship. So develop good cold call and good warm calling techniques. Calling is the term we give it when we use the phone a lot. Nowadays, it may be email. You may use the phone. But warm calling would be you don't know the person, but they're a friend of a friend recommended you to call them. That has happened many times in my life where a friend of a friend recommended you should call this person. So at least you have a name to drop. But in a cold call, get used to developing good habits of quickly introducing who you are, what it is you do, why it is you're getting in touch. Keep it brief, but get the point across. In order to make contacts, the cold call is the hardest, but it is important at times. So I say, again, just keep in mind that the network, your network, you are the center of it. So every thing you bring to the table, the way you act, the way you play, the way you treat other people, that's the beginning of your network. Because we all want to work with people that we enjoy working with, or B, somebody recommended you because they enjoyed working with you. And so that just keeps building off of that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Miller, for these wonderful tips. We're going to turn next to our cello professor, Matthewzulkind.
Hello, everyone. It's really nice to be here and share these things. I think it's amazing so far to see how many overlapping points we all have. And I think for people listening, you want to pay special attention to all these things that we're all saying, and say, wow, there must be something to it. So all these things that we're all sharing. So yeah, basically, what I feel about networking is a lot of it's already been said by Tom and by Angela. Networking is relationship building, and it's really critical in any part of the music profession and takes on many forms. And, you know, even if your dream is to be a soloist, you still have to remember that you'll be working with others. My own experience tells me that the most effective way to network above all is to be the best possible colleague and prepared musician in every situation. I'm not alone in saying that working relationships I built in college continue to stay with me long into my professional life. And I this will touch on a couple of things that have been said already. But my first point was be a good colleague, including your college years. Be a good professional colleague. And I'll tell just a couple of quick stories about how college experiences can stay with you for better or for worse. And I'll tell a couple of bad ones, one at my own expense. And the first one is I was a freshman in college. I had very little experience in a number of ways. I wasn't very smart. I'm sure all of you listening are going to be smarter than I was when I was a freshman in college. And the first semester at school, a young composer came up to me and said, "Hey, will you play my solo cello piece on this composer's concert?" And at the time, I didn't actually know how to say no either. And that's another thing that we could talk about for a long time, about learning when to say no to things. But I said yes, and I was overwhelmed, and I didn't do a very good job. The composer was very nice about it, but I've thought about it a lot since then. I thought about it at that time, and I wasn't super committed to that. This young composer in college ended up becoming a very famous composer, and I won't say her name because many people listening probably know her. And I felt so, and I recently brought her this same piece that I premiered. I brought it back and performed it a couple of times since then because I felt so badly about what kind of job I did in school. So I guess the just to kind of touch on what Angela and Tom have been saying as well, being a really good prepared colleague during your college years. You never know the relationships that you build during this time, how they're going to stay with you into your professional life. One other quick story I will say is I was in a string quartet for many years, and when I was leaving the quartet to pursue this other side of my career today, I left on good terms with my colleagues. I'm very lucky. We just had a kind of a mutual discussion, and I decided to leave, and I was helping them find my replacement. Somebody to replace me in the quartet, because I really wanted to make sure that they lived on with the right fit in their group. And there's a cellist that I recommended. I said, "You really should look at this guy. He's perfect for the group. He's an amazing cellist, one of the most respected musicians that I know." And someone in the group said, "I was in college with him, and he was late to class all the time. He was really irresponsible. He showed me a lot of things that I don't want in a colleague today. And that was shocking at that time because it showed me this guy's behavior in college, like not going to theory class on time, like not doing things that we don't really think about. That made him lose out on a job later on. And that was shocking to me, but it also shows that this is the time as soon as you get into college and probably even before that you want to just be present and be a good colleague, as Tom was saying. I could tell more stories about how college life has continued to today, but I'll move on because I know we have a lot of wonderful speakers. The next thing I'll say is stay current on the web and save all materials. This is something that I wish somebody told me early on, but save every single program that you perform on today. You know, save it. And if you are like me, you have the instinct to throw everything away after a few months. You just give everything to Goodwill that you own because you need to declutter. Don't do that to your programs. Save them all, put them, like get a filing cabinet like the one I have behind me and just be very organized with all of your programs. And by stay current on the web, start building materials that eventually you'll want to put onto a website of some kind. I mean, this is kind of networking 101, but you want to make sure that when you are Googled, that when people start, saying, who is this person anyway? That when they Google you, that you kind of have a bit of control over what material is seen by saying, this is my website, this is the material I want to showcase, versus some random maybe video on YouTube that they might run across first and you say, no, that doesn't represent me. I want to show this one. And having a website gives you that opportunity. And yeah, I could, again, go on, but I will move on. And network in your community. So yeah, we've been talking about professional networking so far, but I'll just add one more, maybe another dimension now to think about. But a couple of years ago, my wife and I founded a chamber music festival here. And we had to get it off the ground, which meant we had to raise excitement and funding and awareness. And we started with $0 and a big plan. And so what that meant was we had to sort of connect with the people who also love our mission of bringing chamber music into our community. And that started by looking at those people who go to every single concert in the community that you start, after you live somewhere for a while, you start recognizing who are the passionate music lovers. You say, I'll play a concert in your living room and I'll share my mission with everybody. And you'll be amazed when you're passionate about something like that, being able to connect with people, even the lovers of music, not just the professionals, but being able to do that, how that can help you realize a dream and mission that you might have to create something. So yeah, maybe I'll leave it there because I know we have a lot more, but anyway, just thought I'd share a few points. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And what is the name of that chamber music festival?
It's really complicated and confusing. It's called the Denver Chamber Music Festival.
All right. So look it up. Does it have a website?
We have a website, yes.
Okay.
And it is hopefully current.
Put that in the chat if you want for our...
Sure, I'll do that right now.
All right. Thank you so much, Professor Zalkind. We now go to Professor of Piano, Stephanie Cheng.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me to be here. And I cannot agree more with my colleagues and what has already been said. And really, as you can see, a lot of my points are actually been already discussed. And I would say a lot of times my students, the first point when I say, to meet the artist backstage after performance, a lot of my students, they go to the concert, they're afraid of doing that. And what's the chance of that performer that you just saw remembering you? Maybe very slim. We don't know. However, you don't know who else you might meet on that backstage. Often is somebody who is pursuing the same things you are. So is a wonderful way, and to meet people and to meet a great performer, and to even just experience what a performer you just watch, what their routine is like on stage. And when I say introduce yourself, one time I was at the airport in New York, and next counter was Yo-Yo Ma checking in, and I kept looking at him, thinking, I think that's Yo-Yo Ma. And the counter person who's checking me in nodded. She knew what I was thinking. And so I just introduced myself. I told him I was on my way to perform a concert, and we start talking. I told him who I studied with, and he started telling me a funny story about my teacher. And so anything could happen, just like Tom mentioned, grocery store, airport checkout line, check-in counters. Let's see, when I also said opportunities to stay in touch with people you have met professionally. So I can just think of, I judged a competition in Italy, and there was another peer adjudicator from China. And we start talking, and now I go to China to recruit every year because of him, from Wuhan, by the way. And so, the opportunity is how you strike a conversation, you introduce yourself, but you have to sustain that first interaction by writing a hello email, for example. A holiday is a great time to do so, and send out even the invitation to people that they may not come to your concert, but they want to know that you have given the concert, an announcement, and support them as well. And I would say supporting them, that's often you're thinking what, just like Tom mentioned, you're thinking what you could get, but at the same time, you want to give back as well. I recently just received an email asking me if I could play a substitute concert for a pianist in town. And so the person told me that the pianist actually recommended me. And I felt like, that's great, that's wonderful. And I remember that person, of course. And but when I wrote back to say, no, unfortunately, too short notice, and the program is very specific, and I wouldn't have that ready. However, I do know so-and-so who I heard perform a very similar program before. And so the same feeling that I felt about somebody recommending me, imagine that the person that I am recommending hears that I recommended that person. So I think that it goes both ways, and that's why it's networking. And follow up with a thank you note. I think Angela and Tom, they both mentioned something like that, especially if you if you've been put up, housed, instead of staying in a hotel, maybe a sponsor, presenters. These are not just the conductor you play with, or not just the soloist that you just play with. Anyone that invited you, or anyone that's running the series, you can include them in your thank you note writing. And the last but not the least is to come to all engagements well prepared. This has been mentioned before. I think, first, network is going to get you the gig. What's going to get you the second gig is to be prepared, because not being prepared, as Matt said, could lose you that second gig. So I think I completely share the same sentiments my colleagues mentioned before.
Thank you so much, Professor Cheng. You're kind of hearing a theme here really stand out about just being well prepared and showing up. It's so important. It's really half the battle in being a successful musician. We go now to Associate Professor of Clarinet, Jeremy Reynolds.
Hi, everybody. It's great to see you all. I'm reading what I wrote, thinking that I actually wrote stuff like telling more stories, but I don't know if I want to like say tips, but yeah, I would say I don't really have it's going to get to the point at the end of the speakers that there's going to be so much overlapping. So I couldn't agree more with what Tom, Stephanie, Matt, and yeah, the three of them have said already, Matt, Tom, and Stephanie. I would say that to sort of sum up what folks have said so far is that you just never know who you'll meet. And so with that said, I think it's just really important to keep an open mind to anything. You never know what projects you'll be invited to participate in. You never know what doors may open. I like that, it's great to be reminded that we always make sure we're, overly prepared for anything that we do get invited or stuff like that. I am so glad that Tom mentioned the whole cold calling, because I kind of say that I'm the king of cold calling. When I think maybe I mentioned this, is that I literally cold call every single solitary trip I take. I write people in the area. I actually never ask for a payment. And that's just a philosophy that I have, because I think for me, it's more important to meet people than to have that potential barrier of if people don't have any funds, or universities are not having enough funding, or this and the other. And that has really worked to my favor, to meet people in a network. But yeah, so I literally cold call. And my little funny story is that I played at a clarinet festival. So in the clarinet world, we're very big on the clarinet festivals. Everyone has clarinet days. Everyone has clarinet weeks. It's really geeky, very dorky. We sit around and talk about reeds and mouthpieces and stuff like that. And it's but I played at a clarinet festival down in Melbourne, Australia, and this girl who I'd heard perform really great concert on a tergato, which is an Eastern European clarinet. And she came up to me at the reception and asked, if I had a great time. And of course, I'd never been to Australia. So I said, yeah, it was great. She asked where I'd been. And she goes, what are you doing tomorrow? I said, well, I'm a big tennis fan, so I know the Australian Open is not going on, but I need to just walk on the grounds of the Australian Open. She said, well, she goes, I'm going to be going around with a former teacher of mine, and I think he's staying right on the corner from you. So why don't you come around tomorrow, and we'll tour Melbourne, and we'll go down the coast together. And I said, yeah, sure, great. So I, went to the place where her teacher was, and it turned out it was the principal clarinet at the Paris Opera. And we spent all day together, and we became really great friends. And because of that relationship, I've been to Paris twice to work with his students. And the last time I went was actually to observe his studio. I was there for a month, and I observed his teaching, and I learned all about his pedagogy, and really served some great purposes. So the moral of my story is that you just never know who you're going to meet. The best moments I've had in my training was in the practice rooms of, taking breaks and talking with people about their interests and finding out what they were thinking about doing, and then things sort of blossom from there. You end up playing chamber music with folks and all sorts of really cool projects. I actually wrote down some new ideas, because Stephanie, Tom, and Matt has already spoken about what was on my mind. And the other thing that I think is that this thing right here has become very evil in our lives. And so I like bouncing off about the emailing and stuff. I think it's really important to make sure we learn how to write properly when you are going to make these emails, or if you're going to write grants or stuff like that. So I think all too often, I think we professors are starting to get emails that just says hi, comma, and then subject, and then just a little bit of information, very little, no thank you, no nothing, sometimes not even the name is signed. And so I think it's really important that you say hello, Professor. We'll say Professor Reynolds, my name is da-da-da, I live here, I currently study with this person, this is where I'm from, I'm interested in the program, Lamont, etc., etc. thank you very much, comma, your name. And I think more and more we're starting to get emails as if you're texting. And I think that's really important to sort of break that habit. I know it's really easy to do. It's funny. Sometimes I mean, sometimes when I dictate messages, I'm talking to people sometimes if I'm dictating, so I'll say question mark or something like that in a comment. So that these phones have become really kind of evil. And so I just, for me, that's basically it. But I think for me, I really just try to keep an open mind. I think collaborating with people, I think that's the best thing about music, is that you just never know who you're going to collaborate with, what can grow, what can blossom out of stuff. And like I said, in this very first, bullet point here, I was able to, commission 5 new pieces of chamber music that we premiered in Carnegie Hall. And my group, we raised about $50,000 for this big, huge project. And the money came from all sorts of different sources. Money from DU, from the University of Tennessee, the Tennessee Arts Council. And well, we actually raised $10,000 from private people who wanted to be part of a private part of the commission, from Libby Larson, very famous composer. So and that was just simply because I went to a music festival and we became friends and we just stayed in touch. So anyway, I'll keep my stop my mouth. But I think just stay open, and you never know what's going to be around the corner. And if you keep that attitude, I think anyone will have a really incredible career, whatever that may entail.
Thank you so much, Professor Reynolds. I'm so glad that you spoke about proper email etiquette. It's so important, and it's really a way that you can make yourself stand out from others. So thank you. Okay, last but not least, I think our newest professor, this is Richard Harris, trombone.
Hi, everybody. So I would say, just following up, being last, unfortunately, everyone's taken all the good points. Actually, I thought that after Professor Miller that I didn't really have that much to add. I was a freelance musician for many, many years in New York City. The best advice, as I wrote there, is to treat everyone with dignity and respect, regardless of their age, ability, or standing in the music profession, because you just never know where your paths are going to cross, and you don't know who they are going to cross paths with. And I will just give you an example of this job right here. About 2 decades ago, I went away to the Music Academy of the West Summer Festival in Santa Barbara, California. And I was one of the older students at that point. I was already in the New World Symphony in Miami Beach, Florida. And so there were a lot of undergrads there who were, a number of years younger than me. However, I certainly remember not acting in a arrogant manner or a disrespectful manner to them. And what happened when I showed up for my interview here at the University of Denver was that a gentleman came up to me and said, "Hi, I'm Sam from the Music Academy of the West. Do you remember me?" And Sam had been an undergrad at that point when I'd met him 20 years ago, but he was now a teaching assistant here at DU. That day, it's a very important day, this audition for my position as teacher. And of course, he had relationships with all of the faculty here and the staff. And so it would have been quite easy if I'd have been being a jerk back then, for him to say, "Hey, don't hire this guy. I remember him being, a real jerk 20 years ago." So, you can see what I have written on the screen there. What I will say is some of the things that haven't been covered, I think, by my colleagues are when you get a gig, if there's a musician there for whom nothing is good enough, avoid them. And this is what I mean. You will come across musicians who moan about, or they complain about the pay, the chairs, the rehearsal space, the conductor, the oboe player, the weather, their shoes. They will complain about everything. So when you're sitting next to somebody like that, or you're meeting somebody like that, treat them with respect, but don't fall into the trap of being the sounding board for their complaints. Other people will notice, and negativity breeds negativity. And it's not fun to be around that. And people will not want to work with you. As some of my colleagues said, be the musician that you want to work with. And that may sound scary, but it really ultimately boils down to two things. And if you remember any two things from this, is just to be a happy, positive, and fun person to be around, and always give your best when you play. Never show up, and just kind of phone it in. Always give your best, whatever the situation. And if you do those two things, I don't think you'll go far wrong. Act with humility, be a good colleague, and you'll end up having some wonderful musical experiences.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Harris, and all of our faculty members. We now have a chance to hear from our attendees. If you have any questions, we can go ahead and put any questions you have in the chat. I'm just looking to see if we've had anything so far. It doesn't look like it. So we'll just give it another minute or two and then kind of wrap things up. While we're waiting for any questions to come in, I'm going to put my email address in the chat. If you have any music admission related questions, I'm always your first point of contact for that. And if any of our panelists want to put contact information or like your websites in there to give our attendees a look at how you represent yourself online. If you have websites, go ahead and put those in there. Also, I'd love to give you guys a chance to plug whatever projects you're working on. So let's see here. Okay, so we don't have any questions coming in, so I think we can just leave it there. It's been really excellent hearing from Professor Reynolds, Professor Zalkind, Professor Miller, Professor Cheng, and Professor Harris. And we have a question. I'm glad that I didn't click end. Okay, so the question is, when you're in college, like second or third year, does this apply to internships as well? Are there music internships? I'm going to pose that to our professors here. What do you know about music internships and how to get them?
Well, if you're looking at administrative positions, then absolutely in symphony orchestras and smaller arts organizations. I'm sure that my colleague Professor Zalkind for his chamber music series has had help from internships on that side of things. Performance internships are a little bit different if you're talking about professional playing opportunities. That is less likely. For professional playing opportunities, when you've networked with your teachers and your students and there is an opening, and you get your chance, that it's years of hard work, mastering your instrument and being the kind of person that other folks want to work with. And that's probably going to come, towards when you're at a master's level, you're going to start getting asked to do, smaller professional work.
So Jeremy,
sorry? Am I muted? Am I okay?
You're good now.
All right, cool. I think for us, I think on the performing side, maybe it equates to summer music festivals, maybe for the performing aspect. So I think it's terribly important that at any level, even after your freshman year, if there's like some seminars, like a 3-day seminar or something like that, that's a great way to. I think going to music festivals is also a great way because you're gonna meet like the top of the top from all the different schools, and the interests are gonna be very refined to what your interests are, and that way another really great opportunity to network with folks. But I think Professor Harris is right. I think for administrative, that's different than internships are different than performance. But I think I'm a huge fan of. I mean, some of my closest friends, even to this day, music or not, are from summer music festivals.
Stephanie, did you want to answer that?
I would just say there is a website called Higher Education Chronicles. That's a website that often jobs, you can find job listing. I think you can create a search engine. So to put in, for example, piano, and perhaps internship, or whatever the keywords, and then whenever there is listing that matches your keyword, they will send you a email of listing of the jobs. I think that service is free.
And I just put that in the chat. It's jobs.chronicle.com. So good resource. And Matt, did you want to add to that?
Just a small thing that I think a lot of people are surprised at how small some music organizations are, how small some, homegrown music festivals or series, like our unbelievable chamber music series we have here in Denver, the Friends of Chamber Music, is run by a very small group of people, and they're all volunteers. And so I think all of the things that we're talking about as far as getting to know people, being good colleagues, writing professional way, getting to know people at concerts, and I think all of those things definitely still apply if maybe you want to get involved with any of these organizations that suit your area of interest. That some of them might be smaller than you think, and it might be quite accessible to be involved in them.
Thank you. Justin is asking, could you give an example between a bad cold call versus a good cold call? Tom, you mentioned that. So do you want to take that first?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like Jeremy had brought that up too. I think it's one of our Jeremy we had discussed this once between the two of us, that how the cold calling is just one of those things, those unpleasant things that actually you can make into a pleasant situation. So a bad cold call, and again, it doesn't necessarily mean an actual phone call. It can be an email as well. It's a cold contact or a warm contact. A cold contact is somebody you don't know at all. And a bad, cold contact, I get some from people. One of the other things that I do in addition to teaching and performing is I have a sheet music publishing company, and I get a lot of cold calls from people looking to have their music published. I save the bad ones and the good ones, just to remind myself how not to write a bad cold call. The bad ones, first of all, people who use my first name that I've never met, that's not a good idea. If you've not met somebody, if I never met Matthewzulkind, I wouldn't email saying, "Hi, Matt." We don't have that familiarity, so that would not be a good first step to take. The other thing, everybody's busy. Nobody has a lot of time, whether it's on phone or whether I'm reading an email. So it needs to be brief. A bad cold call is long and lengthy. It tells your story. Cold calls don't need to tell your story. They should be very brief. They should be, here's who I am by introduction. Here's why I found you. One nice compliment. I like what you do for this reason, or what you do is similar to my aspirations, whatever. And then a follow-up of, would you be interested? May I get a lesson from you? Would you be interested in looking at my materials, et cetera, et cetera? When would be a good time to contact you again? In other words, don't be a pest. So a good cold call has a very definite purpose: introduction, the reason I'm in touch, and a follow-up. And it should be very short, paragraph at the most. A bad cold call is, here's my story. This is what I want to do. This is what I want. This is what I want. This is what I want. That's not a good thing. So just basically avoid a lot of let the person know you're respecting of their time and you're respectful of them. So that's what I'll say about it. Jeremy might have something to say as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have much more to say about that. Just why you're reaching out. I love the idea of you were being reminded. I got your name from so and so, or I heard you play at a concert, or I was really impressed by this, or something like that. And would love to collaborate with you. I think also, at least at our level, I think it's also pretty cool when you reach out. You can say, I would love to do an exchange or some kind of collaborative event. But yeah, I think what Professor Miller just laid out is quite sufficient. Yeah. I like the idea of the bad cold call. This is what I want. This is me. Blah blah blah. This is what I've done. No one needs to hear your resume in a first meeting. If you've been around the block long enough, they can easily Google your name. Yeah.
Thank you both so much. I just want to emphasize one thing you mentioned about using first name versus last name. When in doubt, just always use the last name. And if you're not sure about the salutation, you do, Mr. or Ms. And then if you're emailing a professor, you can never go wrong with just Professor so-and-so. But yeah, reserve first name usage for when you have established that relationship already. And when in doubt, just use the last name.
Actually, I have a story about that. Joe Alessi with his students. Joe Alessi is the principal trombone, the New York Philharmonic, and he's also teacher at Juilliard. He, a student of his got a job after his undergrad and said, Mr. Alessi, can I call you Joe now? And Joe said, no, you've just won the job. When you get tenure, you can call me Joe.
I love it.
we had I mean, just because Richard mentioned this, when I won my first job, his name is Mitchell Lurie, and he used to be principal of Chicago Symphony, and we had to call him Mr. Lurie, but he called me up and he said, well, it's now time for you to call me Mitchell. But he reached out after I won my job. So yeah, well, we have all these funny stories. Just reminded me of what Richard said.
Yeah. And it's always a sign of respect too. So, all right. Well, those were all the questions that have come through. So we shall end it there. Thank you so much to our participants, and thank you so much to our wonderful faculty panel for sharing this invaluable information on networking in music. Thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Thanks for organizing this, Angela.
My pleasure. Bye, everyone.
Take care, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you.